When I was in college, this is before I was a Christian, but I was introduced by a friend of mine to books by J.R.R. Tolkien, and that whole genre of fantasy novels. And typically the story goes with a young teenage boy who's lost. Or he's a servant, or he's a slave, or he's out in the woods somewhere, and he finds a princess who's run away, doesn't know she's the princess. He saves her, they slay the dragon, he marries the princess, and they live happily ever after. These stories all have the same sort of thing. A young man teenager who ends up becoming king and marrying the princess. Sound like someone we know? Young boys read and have all heard the stories, the accounts of David and Goliath. And I think every young boy, when he gets his first slingshot, thinks of, slaying the giant, being David. And I think all of us will say, what would it have been like to have been David? Would we really want to be David? What truly separated David from all the other people? He was a seventh son of a large family. His father even forgot that he was there. He's out in the field. Where are your sons? Well, I got one more. He's out there in the field. Let's call him in. And he became king. But would we really want what David had to face? He was greatly honored by God, greatly used by God, did many wonderful things, slaying the dragon, the giant, marrying the king's daughter, Michal, all kinds of things. But would we want his troubles? So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through a number of scriptures that look at the life of David, and hopefully we'll draw to a conclusion at the end. But let's turn to 1 Samuel chapter 18. Here we have a young man who was out in his father's field, sent to his brothers, slayed the dragon. I said dragon, but you know what I mean. Goliath. 1 Samuel 18, verse 6. Let's pick it up there. And it came to pass when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out from all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. So far, so good. Everything's going the way the book is supposed to go. And Saul was very wroth and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed, but thousands. And what have they more, and what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward. And it came to pass on the morrow that an evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. So it started good, but he had trouble. The king himself had tried to kill him. Turn to verse 19 in the same chapter. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And now in chapter 25, verse 44, it says, But Saul had given Michal his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, which was of Gilam. So David married the princess, the daughter of the king, and we find out later on that the king took his wife and married her off to another man, not according to the fairy tale. Turn to 2 Samuel, chapter 6. Chapter 6, verse 20. Then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovereth himself." And David said unto Michal, "It was before the Lord, which chose me before thy father, and before all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore I will play before the Lord, and I will yet be more vile than thus, and will be base in mine own sight, and of the handmaids which thou hast spoken of them shall I be had in honor." Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. Was not a good relationship. She had held David in contempt. David had other problems. Turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 2. I titled this at the beginning, and this is not going to be the title, Bobby, but I started off with, "So you think you have problems." 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 13. And Jesse begat his firstborn, Eliab, and Abinadab the second, and Shema the third, Nathaniel the fourth, Radai the fifth, Ozem the sixth, David the seventh, whose sisters were Zuriah and Abigail. And the sons of Zuriah, Abishai and Joab and Asahel, 3. And Abigail bare Amasa, and the father of Amasa was Jether the Ishmaelite. So it's important to know the relationships here. The sons of Zuriah were David's first cousins. Amasa was David's first cousin, and we find these over and over again in Scripture. So if you go to chapter 3 of 2 Samuel, we're going to hear about the trouble of the sons of Zuriah. Chapter 3, verse 27, "And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly, and smote him there under the 5th rib, that he died, for the blood of Asahel his brother. And afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before God forever from the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath issue, or that is a leper, or that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread. So Joab and Abishai his brother slew Abner, because he had slain their brother Asahel at Gibeon in battle. And David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, Rend your clothes, and gird you with sackcloth, and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier, and they buried Abner in Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented over Abner and said, Died Abner as a fool dieth? Thy hands were not bound, nor thy feet put in fetters. As a man falleth before a wicked man, so fellest thou. And all the people wept over him. And when all the people came to cause David to eat meat, while it was yet day, David sware and saying, So do God to me, and more also, if I tasted bread or aught else, till the sun be down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as whatsoever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it was not the king, it was not of the king to slay Abner the son of Ner. And the king said unto his servants, Know ye not that there is a prince and a great man fallen this day in Israel? And I am this day weak, though anointed king. And these men, the sons of Zeruiah, be too hard for me. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. These men were his right-hand men. They were his lieutenants in his kingdom, and they were a trouble. They caused problems, they were difficult, and they led his army. Joab did. 2 Samuel 16. Verse 7, And thus said Shimei when he cursed. This is when David was coming back into Jerusalem. Come out, thou, or when he was leaving. Come out, thou bloody man, thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom, thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Then said Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, here we go again, unto the king, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. Nice fellow. And the king said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord hath said to him, Curse David. Who shall say then, Wherefore hast thou done so? And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, Behold, my son, which came forth from my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do? Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. So David has Saul who is after him. He has the contempt of Michal. He has the sons of Zeruiah who are giving him nothing but trouble. And then he has a self-inflicted wound. 2 Samuel chapter 12. Verse 13, and this is after he brought Bathsheba to his house, got her pregnant, and arranged for the death of Uriah in the midst of battle. 2 Samuel 12:13, and David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, The Lord hath put away thy sin, thou shalt not die. Howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. He had trouble all around him. 2 Samuel 12:19. But when David saw that his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. Then David rose from the earth, washed, and anointed himself, and changed his apparel, and came into the house of the Lord, and worshipped. Then he came to his own house, and when he required, they set bread before him, and he did eat. Then said his servants to him, What thing is this that thou hast done? Thou didst fast and weep for the child while it was alive, but when the child was dead, thou didst rise and eat bread. And he said, While the child was yet alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, Who can tell whether God will be gracious to me that the child may live? But now that he is dead, wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. So he lost a son. I don't know what it's like to lose a child. I know what it's like to lose a parent. It's hard. I can't imagine the grief of a parent losing a child. 2 Samuel chapter 13. He had problems within his own family. Anyone have difficulties within their own family? Amnon, his son, raped his daughter Tamar. Talk about trouble in the family. 2 Samuel 13:13. Tamar is speaking here. And I, whither shall I go, and whither shall I cause my shame to go? As for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. Howbeit he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said unto her, Arise, be gone. Not only was that terrible sin, but there was hatred among the siblings of his offspring. And she said unto him, There is no cause. This evil in sending me away is greater than the other that thou didst unto me. But he would not hearken unto her. Then he called his servant that ministered unto him, and said, Put now this woman out from me, and bolt the door after her. And she had a garment of divers colors upon her, for which such robes were the king's daughters that were virgins apparelled. Then his servant brought her out, and bolted the door after her, and Tamar put ashes on her head, and rent her garment of diverse colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went on crying. And Absalom, her brother, said unto her, Hath Amnon thy brother been with thee? But hold now thy peace, my sister. He is thy brother. Regard not this thing. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. And this is the verse that I wanted to point out. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very wroth. So what happened as a result of this? Go down to verse 28. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, Mark ye now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say unto you, Smite Amnon, then kill him. Fear not, have not I commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. And the servants of Absalom did unto Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons rose, and every man gat him upon his mule, and fled. And it came to pass, while they were in the way, that tidings came to David, saying, Absalom hath slain all the king's sons, and there is none of them left. Then the king arose, tare his garments, and lay on the earth, and all his servants stood by with their clothes rent. And Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, answered and said, Let not my lord suppose that they have slain all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon only is dead. For by the appointment of Absalom, this hath been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Discontent, murder of one son by another son, the rape of one daughter by one son. And it gets worse. Chapter 15. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. And down to verse 13. And there came a messenger to David, saying, The hearts of the men are after Absalom. And verse 14, And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, Arise, let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. Open rebellion, trying to take the kingship away, trying to take the kingdom away with war. Now, one of the more difficult things was not only with his family, not only with his loss of his son with Bathsheba, the loss of his son Amnon, the loss of the virginity of his daughter, all of this. I think one of the things that hurt him the most was what happened with Ahithophel. Chapter 23 of 2 Samuel. It's important to understand a little bit of the background here, and we'll look at a couple verses here. And I think we see a little bit of some of the motivation behind Ahithophel's opinion of David and his defection. 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 34. Okay, Eliphalet was the son of Ahashbai, the son of the Machathite, Elam, the son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite. So keep in mind the Ahithophel. Eliam was the son of Ahithophel. Eliam is the son of Ahithophel. Chapter 13, verse 3 says, "And David inquired after the woman," this is about the Bathsheba, "and one said, Is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So Bathsheba was the daughter of Eliam. Eliam was the daughter of Ahithophel. Bathsheba was the granddaughter of Ahithophel. So if you follow the family line, it's important to keep in mind that I think Ahithophel kept this in from the time that Uriah was killed and Bathsheba was taken by David, and they lost the son that was born to them, which would have been Ahithophel's great-grandson as a result of this sin. Turn to 2 Samuel chapter 15. "And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up, weeping as they went up. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." Turn to Psalm 41. Not only did he ask the Lord to turn the counsel into foolishness, David expressed his hurt in these Psalms. Psalm 41, verse 7 says, "All that hate me whisper together against me. Against me do they devise my hurt. An evil disease, they say they, cleaveth fast unto them. And now he that lieth shall rise up no more. Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me." Psalm 55, verse 12. "For it was not an enemy that reproached me, then I could have borne it. Neither was it he that hated me that did magnify himself against me, then I would have hid myself from him. But it was thou, a man mine equal, my guide, my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together, and walked unto the house of God in company. Let death seize upon them, and let them go down quick into hell, for wickedness is in their dwellings and among them." He said he could have borne it if it had been an enemy. So the implication here is that this was very difficult for him to bear. This hurt him to the core. Again, keep in mind Ahithophel and how he saw that Bathsheba was taken advantage of and how shame was brought to that whole situation. Chapter 16 of 2 Samuel says, "Then said Absalom unto Ahithophel, Give counsel among you what shall we do? This is now Absalom. Absalom is in Jerusalem. David is out there. Ahithophel has taken the crown or the kingdom for a short time. And Ahithophel says unto Absalom, Go in unto thy father's concubines, which he hath left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred by thy father. Then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. So they spread Absalom a tent upon the house of the top of the house, and Absalom went in unto the father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. And the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was as if a man had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel, both to David and with Absalom. So what we find here is absolute detesting of David by his own son in a way which was just terrible and brought additional difficulty and trouble to David. Then we have the death of Absalom, which we hear about when Absalom goes out and fights with David's men, and he tells them, don't hurt the young man. Verse 33 of 2 Samuel 18 says, And the king was much moved, and he went over to the chamber of the gate. I'm sorry, let me go back. Verse 31, And behold, Cushai came, and Cushai said, Tidings, my lord the king, for the Lord hath avenged thee this day of all them that rose up against thee. And the king said unto Cushai, Is the young man Absalom safe? And Cushai answered, The enemies of my lord, and all that rise against thee to do thee hurt, be as that young man is. And the king was much moved, and went up to his chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, he said, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, my son, would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son. And it goes on. So I go through all these troubles that David had. And we look at David, we look at these patriarchs, and we admire them. David was greatly used of God. Abraham was greatly used of God. Noah was greatly used of God. We look through all the patriarchs. We look at the New Testament people, Peter and Paul, and all of these. And in our imaginations, we wonder what it would be like, if I was used like that, if I could have that kind of value to the kingdom of God that he chose to use them as. But look at all the troubles. Look at all the difficulties. Look at what they went through. How did David handle it? Let's look at 1 Samuel 13. I'm going to look at a few verses here. First Samuel 13:13, and Samuel said to Saul, Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart. And the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over the people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. If you go to the New Testament, this is repeated in Acts chapter 13, verse 21. Afterward, and this is the recital of the history, and afterward they desired a king, and God gave unto them Saul, the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, by the space of 40 years. And when he removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill my will. Of this man's seed God hath, according to his promise, raised unto Israel a Savior, Jesus. David was a man after God's own heart. In all of the troubles, he kept his focus on the Lord. I'm going to skip a couple of verses here. Look at Psalm 3. How am I doing here? Psalm 3. This is a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. So we're talking about one of these troubles. We're talking about one of the difficulties that he faced. Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. Selah. People were saying, God has abandoned you. You say you're a man after God's own heart. God has abandoned you, is what he was being accused of. But thou, O Lord, this is David now pleading to God. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory and the lifter up of my head. I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. Selah. I laid me down and slept. I awaked. It sounds like he was surprised. I awaked, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people. Selah. He was in the midst of troubles, but he went to God. He went to the Lord. He pleaded with the Lord. He was troubled. He wept. He cried. When we have troubles, all of us have troubles. We weep. We're hurt. Some of them are self-inflicted troubles. Others are circumstances that fall upon us. We have no role in them coming to play upon us. But what does he do? He goes to the Lord. Psalm 4, another psalm of David. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. O ye sons of men, how long will ye turn my glory into shame? So his glory had been turned into shame, he's saying. How long will you love vanity and seek after leasing? Selah. But know that the Lord hath set him apart that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed. That's good advice. And be still. Selah. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. There be many that say, who will show us any good? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Thou hast put gladness in my heart more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. So he's going to lay me down and sleep in peace and sleep in the midst of the trial because he's going to the Lord. Psalm 5. Another psalm of David. Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my meditation. Hearken unto the voice of my cry, my King and my God, for unto thee I will pray. My voice shall thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward thy holy temple. Lead me, O Lord, in thy righteousness because of my enemies. Make thy way straight before my face. This is a pleading of a man in trouble. This is instruction to us. This is example to us. For there is no faithfulness in their mouth. Their inward part is very wickedness. Their throat is an open sepulchre. They flatter with their tongue. Destroy thou them, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them out in the multitude of their transgressions. For they have rebelled against thee. But let all those that put their trust in thee rejoice. Here's that rejoicing that our brother talked to us about. This is in a time of trouble. This is when everyone's against them. For they have rebelled against thee. Let them ever shout for joy because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful in thee. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous. With favor thou wilt compass him about with a shield. Turn to Samuel. Let's see. I think it's 2 Samuel 23. Yeah, 2 Samuel 23. I didn't have the 2 in front of there. I was pretty sure it was right. Now, verse 1. Now these be the last words of David. David, the son of Jesse, said, and the man who was raised up on high, the anointed of God, the God of Jacob, and the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord spake to me by me, and his word was in my tongue. The God of Israel said, the rock of Israel spake to me, he that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. And he shall be as the light of the morning, when the sun riseth, even a morning without clouds, as the tender grass springeth out of the earth by clear shining after rain. Although my house be not so with God. Although my house be not so with God, yet he hath made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and sure. For this is all my salvation and all my desire, although he make it not to grow. But the sons of Belial shall be all of them as thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man that shall touch them must be fenced with iron and the staff of a spear, and they shall be utterly burned with fire in the same place. So, with all that, all the history of David, and we just touched it, there's a lot more that we could say about the difficulties that David faced. 1 Peter chapter 4. And I know you know this, our brother refers to this all the time. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, not which may try you, but which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. It happened to David. But rejoice. Here we have it again. But rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye. For the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. David continued to honor God through all of this. I don't find anywhere where he blamed God. He cried out. He asked for relief. He questioned how it all happened, but he always glorified God. Verse 15, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if any suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first begin with us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Wherefore let them that suffer according to the will of God commit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator. God is faithful even when he's putting us through trials, even when we've gotten ourselves in a mess. Yeah. Acts chapter 5. How am I doing for time here? Chapter 5, verse 34. And this is when the apostles were called before the Pharisees. And they stood up, and there stood up one in the council, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, who was Paul's teacher, a doctor of the law, had in reputation among all the people, and commanded to put the apostles forth for a little space. And he said unto them, Ye men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what ye intend to do as touching these men. For before these days rose up Theudas, boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves, who was slain, and all, as many as obeyed him, were scattered, brought to naught. After this man rose up Judas of Galilee in the days of the taxing, and drew away much people after him. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. And now I say to you, refrain from these men, let them be alone, for if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God. And to him they all agreed. And when they had called the apostles, here it is, and beaten them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Jesus, and let them go. And they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And daily in the temple and in every house they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus Christ. So, what do we see in David's life in the world? As we see all of these difficulties that are upon him, and it's a contrast as to how God saw him. God saw him as a man after my own heart. And we saw him as a man with leadership problems from his king, Saul, from his son, the sons of Zeruiah, from his wife, from Ahithophel, his close friend and counselor, from his daughter that got all of these things. We look at that, and I think we tend to look at things almost the way the Pharisees did. How about John chapter 9, when Jesus healed the blind man? Whose sin caused this blindness? Whose sin caused this problem to be here? Sometimes we think that when we have troubles, it's a sign that God is displeased with us. And he's certainly displeased with sin. We know that. We're not saying anything other than that. But sometimes we look at our failures and our difficulties and say, how can God love us? How can this be? I shouldn't be up here talking to you. None of us are worthy, but that's the whole point. We look at David, And we know that God loved David greatly. I don't think there's any question. Even though he went through all these difficulties, even though he had all these problems, he gave him a covenant that the Messiah would come from his loins, an everlasting covenant. He was confident in God. John chapter 13, we're going to close. David may have been used mightily by God in the history of the nation of Israel and the establishment of the line of the Messiah in a unique way. But look at this. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of the world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he, Jesus, God the Son, loved them unto the end. Chapter 15 of John. Herein is my Father glorified, that ye bear much fruit. So shall ye be my disciples. As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. So, no matter what your trials, child of God, no matter what your failures, even if they're self-inflicted, no matter your past, you are loved. You're loved not a whit less than God loved David. You are loved not a whit less than God the Father loves Jesus Christ the Son. So when we're in the midst of all these things, and believe me, we all have these times when we're awake at night, can't sleep, have difficulties. What's going to happen? I'm hurt. I'm anxious. I'm worried. Remember, as a child of God, you are loved in the same degree, the same way that God the Father loves Jesus Christ the Son. Hope that's a comfort in the time of troubles.